Hey, it's Joel. Before we get into today's episode of Mind the Gap, I want to set the stage real quick. There's this study I came across, and it completely flipped how I think about success. It showed that the most successful people aren't necessarily the smartest, not the most talented, not even the hardest working. They're the ones who got lucky and knew what to do when luck showed up. Now, don't get me wrong, effort still matters. But today we're asking how much? And more importantly, how can we put ourselves in a kind of position where effort actually pays off? If you've ever felt like you're doing all the right things and still not breaking through, this one's for you. Welcome to Mind the Gap.
Steven, how are you?
Good, Joel. I'm in 4 countries in less than a week.
Man, you gotta tell me what to do about all the jet lag. So I know right now you're in Australia, in Sydney,
Yep.
which is from Germany 8 hours ahead. So you're 16 hours ahead from the US, if I'm not mistaken, depending on what
I think
time
14
zone.
right now. Yeah.
Yeah, depending on what time zone you're from in the US. So Miami and Boston will probably be 6
Yeah.
hours back, so about 14. You were in where else were you this past week?
Japan, I'll be in New Zealand tomorrow, and then over the weekend I'll be in Chile, and then back to the US. In Asia, you underestimate how far places are between each other, right? So it was roughly 10-hour flight, a little over 10-hour flight from Tokyo to Sydney, which I was kind of, oh, they're neighbors, like right next to each other. It'll
Yeah.
be there like 3 hours. No. It's not like going from, Chicago to New York. It's very, very long trip. So a lot of land and a lot of sea to cover between. So um, it's been a great week though. I'll tell you, I mean, I've never been to Australia before. So to me, it's kind of an adventure and it's interesting. It's interesting, both a visually stunning place. The people are the same but different. We all speak English here, but a little bit differently, a little funny accent, but not to offend
Yeah.
any Aussies out there. But
hmm
then also just a visually stunning place. And then I had dinner last night. Of course, the local favorites were served on the menu, and you can imagine the kangaroo was on the menu.
hmm
I, wa-
hmm
I
hmm
wasn't expecting it. It was ordered and it's served, and it was a bit different for me. I don't really,
What is it? Is it
again,
served the way you would see like steak and like is it made the same way and
I
as
think
we have
normally it would
beef
be.
or
Yeah, normally it would be, but in this
okay.
case, this restaurant was quite frou-frou, and they served it tartare wrapped in nori, which is seaweed, and
Ooh.
so it was like imagine you're going to like an Italian restaurant and you have steak tartare, or like a French restaurant or an Italian restaurant, you have um, kind of a similar kind of carpaccio, for instance, right?
Yeah.
Where you take beef, right? In this case, it was a tartare of kangaroo, and the implement that you put the tartare on top of was nori, which is seafood. And it had an interesting flavor. I would say kind of tasted beef-like, but the texture was very different. I'll just say that.
hmm
And I didn't go for seconds. I didn't love it, but
Yeah.
I had to try it.
So talking about perspective and talking about today's episode's topic is I wanna hear your first raw thoughts about the term overnight success, whatever your first reactions are when you hear somebody being called overnight success.
Well, look, when you think about discovering people or discovering companies or kind of discovering an entity, that I think there's an impression that this is sort of a magical moment. But with respect to an athlete or a musician who's been, all of a sudden is the next best thing since sliced bread and is on the radio or is being touted on a commercial or whatnot. This is not an overnight. Essentially, it's a slog. It's an absolute hustle for them. It takes a long time. As an athlete, it's about training and discipline. It's not overnight. In the music world, yes, there are virtuosos, painters, there are, savants, people who are amazing artists and,
hmm
sculptors and musicians, but it comes with such a cost to their lives, their personal lives, what they have to give up, the level of sacrifice. When you look at startups, sort of more germane to my world, I think about the typical investor, the typical venture capitalist is investing in, say, a dozen, maybe 10 companies.
Mhm.
They're assuming from algorithmically that they're going to make an investment. They're hoping to see a success out of that group of companies that they invest in over a period of time. Typically, they're going to invest in 10 companies. 8 of them are going to be honestly a failure. They're not going to
Mhm.
succeed in the levels that they assume. They're not going to receive the multiples from their investment that they would assume. Now, that's not to say that they're not going to be acquired or they're going to be launched and actually become a successful company over time, but they're going to take a long time. And it's going to be multiple rounds. And as an entrepreneur, you're always raising money to, further the company, continue to
Mhm.
strengthen the company, drive the company towards success. So it's very much not an overnight thing. But the investor also is looking for those remaining 2 or so that will be the high multiplier, the high multiple return that will justify that investment. So we think about investing in our own personal lives. We think about concepts like diversification, which effectively help us balance or in some cases mitigate systemic risk. Investors who are investing in startups are also making investments across a wide array of startups that do different things in different industries for different applications and use cases and are targeting different markets in some cases.
That's It's a lot of money back for the 2000 and whatever. Yeah. Hmm. Mhm. Yeah, you said something that I want to pick up on. You said, and I've heard that example where a venture capitalist firm says we buy 50 startups, we expect 25 to fail, we expect 2 to break out, we expect 5 more to do okay. And then I asked that person that told me that, who works in VC here in Germany, which is you know, investors in Germany, especially when it comes to risk capital, they're a lot more conservative. It's tougher to raise that type of money. That's, I think, one of the reasons that Germany is having a hard time staying up in the race about AI and the new technologies and all that stuff. But I asked him what's the math behind it? What's the logic? Because I mean, venture capitalism is a big industry. There's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of interests involved in the stakeholders, and I can't imagine that the tactics are just throwing things at the wall until something sticks. And he said, well, no, we obviously do a lot of due diligence and we research the companies and we try to make it as logical as possible. But at some point, we only have to be right once. I've also came across a paper where they look at the correlation between luck and talent. They argue that talent is distributed across societies pretty equally. There's a big component of luck and being at the right place in the right time. When I read that paper, it was almost demoralizing because they sounded a lot like, well, it's luck and it's just opportunity, and if that opportunity doesn't come, you're not going to succeed. And if it's something you can translate into very different aspects of your life, how is your perspective on that? And you've obviously climbed the career ladder and had a lot of success in your professional and personal life. What were those times and maybe situations where you didn't have that information and where you were young and standing in front of that Goliath of a challenge with your goal in mind? And what did you tell yourself to continue to put yourself in the best spot to get a chance to show and to earn what you've been working for?
There's like this group of very successful people that just continue to be successful. When you think about entrepreneurs, also there's a fallacy here, which is that everything this entrepreneur, this athlete with raw talent is always going to just
Mm-hmm.
sort of turn out, they're going to spin gold, right? It's not necessarily true. I've
Mm-hmm.
had an opportunity to work with entrepreneurs who did an amazing job, tremendously successful. And at the same time, the next venture was an abysmal mess. It was like an absolute, horror
Mm-hmm.
show. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's not like everything you touch turns to gold. When you think about like Steve Jobs, for instance, one of the things that he would say he's famous for saying is people don't know yet that they need what we're building. And this is truly revolutionary. They've had some flops along the way. Remember, I mean, Apple had Newton before they had the iPhone, right? Before
Mm-hmm.
they had the iPad, right? Or the, iPod, right? That those things were tremendously successful and they were revolutionary in their own right. The iPhone mainly being that, and everything else is sort of if you will, kind of an offshoot of that. They also had some failures. There were some true
Mm-hmm.
failures in products. You've seen it in the car industry as well, where a major car manufacturer makes an absolute staple automobile, of a particular class of automobile, and it's an absolute success. And then 4 or 5 years later, they build another model, and that model isn't as successful as the one that preceded it. And so it's similar with entrepreneurs. There's a fallacy there that these entrepreneurs that have the ability to just touch whatever they touch turns to gold. And that's not true. Every day
Mm-hmm.
is a slog. Every day is a hustle. And if you're an entrepreneur, you're probably spending your entire day, probably 23 out of the 24 hours of the day, trying to drive yourself to deliver on what it is you're ultimately wanting to bring to market. And so it's not necessarily like these people are sitting back and going, well, I've done this before, I can do it again. And, it's no big deal and it'll just work out. They're completely, nerve wracked every day with, this concept of failure. And so I don't believe that entrepreneurs can just sit back. They're driven by design. They're risk takers. They're folks who are really enjoy the risk as much as it may torment them. It also is
Mm-hmm.
enjoyable to them. And so when you look at some of the athletes out there that push themselves, that continue to push themselves, there is a price to be paid eventually, right? Their bodies wear out. But then look at somebody like John Elway, right? This is a really
Mm-hmm.
interesting guy who's a tremendous, athlete in football, and he turned around after his career, ended from a professional football perspective, and he pivoted into a completely different industry. Now he's like one of the top franchisee of car dealerships. He has huge
Mm-hmm.
amount of car dealerships out west. And so
Mm-hmm.
he's taken obviously his name and his brand and he's applied it, but he's done this and he's applied himself to this to drive yet another success in a completely different industry.
Mm-hmm.
Do these people even sleep? Do they rest? Do they take a
Hmm.
break? You mentioned one and done kind of thinking, which is all I need is that one idea and I'm good for life. No, 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 no. These people
Mm-hmm.
don't do that. In fact, all the companies that you see that are successful, they're continuously experimenting. They're building and designing, and they are breaking their designs and they're rebuilding their designs until they're absolutely perfect and they can capture more and more market share in the market. They never rest. So the best companies out there that you associate excellence with, like Apple or Tesla, I know that's controversial, but these kinds of companies that create these very superior products for their individual markets, you look at them and you go, how do they keep doing it? Well, they put a tremendous amount of effort and talent behind it. Another aspect to explore is you talked a little bit about the the sort of the pool of people that make these decisions, the pool of people that seem to be always successful. There are these concepts of clusters. Like, for instance, if you go, I've spent a lot of time working for Bay Area companies out west and, California, and there are a tremendous amount of successful entrepreneurs there. And there is maybe just something in the water there, but I also think that there's that sort of Wild West mentality. And you have these people who are in a milieu or in a group that of equals, so they're driven
Hmm.
by that competition. Okay, so you could call it like a kind of a friendly competition, but there's that group of entrepreneurs that went in on eBay. Of course, Musk was one of them, and there's like Peter Thiel, and there are all these sort of people that run together, and they're always continuously successful, but they almost drive each other towards that next success, right? And
Hmm.
this is the
Hmm.
spirit of the entrepreneur. They don't give up. They're not sitting on a beach. I do have some friends who have built great products, sold companies, and then said, I'm out. This is it for me. But they're probably not the typical entrepreneur. They're like,
Yeah.
I made my success, I reached my goal, and I'm now ready. And then, everything's, dependent upon where you are in your life and what kind of pressures you have. People make sacrifices to their family, to their health, to their wellness, in order to be successful. And I've seen it in my own career. I mean, I think we talked about this on one of the other episodes, but like early in my career, I used to drive myself so hard that I was traveling too much. I was gaining weight. I was not getting any sleep. I was starting to, develop, conditions that later had to get medication for in order to, insomnia, things like that, where you're just sort of driven. I'm thinking all the time about work. I'm thinking as I'm going to sleep, I'm thinking about what I need to do tomorrow. And it's not healthy. But this is the kind of mindset of the entrepreneur. They're always thinking about that very next thing they need to do to keep being successful. They drive themselves. They're driven by
Hmm.
internal and external factors.
Yeah. No. So I guess number one thing you could say is it's a you have to enjoy and love what you do. You have to have a passion for it because
Yeah.
it'll ask a lot out of you. And then number two, you have to be enjoying the process more than the end goal to stay in the race because you might have a one and done type of situation where you're the guy that invents those things you can wrap around your to go coffee, the little paper so you don't burn your fingers and you get a royalty off of that and you never have to work again. But you could be a serial entrepreneur that does it over and over. A second thing that I really like from this approach and that you just tapped on, and it's something they talk about in that paper, they basically ask the question, why do the rich stay rich? Why does wealth that's once accumulated by one family usually stays there? There's a saying in Germany that I keep thinking of whenever I talk about generational wealth and inheritance and stuff. It says the first generation works hard and makes money. The second educates themselves and multiplies it. The third just lets it exist. And the fourth studies goes to college for social studies, which is a metaphor for they waste the money, you know. And so they asked the question in that paper, why do the rich stay rich? And they basically say if you buy into the idea that success is a mixture out of attempts, but also a large proportion of the probability that you become successful in what you do is the opportunities you have, the so-called luck. And they say that people that are in circumstances when it comes to the people they know, the places they go, like a kid, a young person from a rich family, they will have more exposure to situations where they could get lucky in terms of they run into a investor that is bought in because that is interested in investing into their company because he knows their parents or whatever. So across your career and maybe even from people you worked with and just people you got to know, how big is the factor of the company you keep, of the not just your work environment but your private life with the friends and people you have around you, and how do you go about it? Because obviously networking is, once you're in it, it's fun. Like now, for me personally, for example, I've kind of crossed the first hill where I'm like, I know my way around. I know how to approach people. I know what some people want to hear. But I think if you're standing in front of it and like, okay, I get it. I got a network. I got to find people that could be interesting to me and could be beneficial to my career. but all you know is your high school teacher and your best friend. How do you go about it?
Well, networking is absolutely paramount to my success. I religiously practice networking. Oh, the other thing is, I was thinking through what you're saying is, as a reaction to something I said earlier, is in order to sustain, to have long-term success, you have to be thinking about mental fitness, physical fitness, spiritual fitness, economic fitness. Those are elements that are going to keep you healthy, wealthy, and wise, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
You need to have things in your life. The company you keep is important. Okay, back to networking, right? So I have a group of people that I can contact for advice and mentorship and guidance on topics. I have people that I know that are extremely successful, and I look at the patterns that they have in their life and decisions they've made, can model myself after those people. If I have a question about something, I can reach out to somebody. I engage in regular networking and very frequent communication with a small group of people that I try to keep up with, and I foster those relationships. I try to create authentic relationships with people. They're not based on favors or asks. They're based on really truly understanding the other person, understanding what drives them and what their life is like, and perspectives. And I respect those things if we have differences or if we have similarities. But you only get to that point where you understand people's differences and similarities if you learn about them, if you listen, if you
mm-hmm,
make time for one another, investing in one another. So I think those are all very, very important elements about how you build the network. The network is also important thinking about business. It's, not only is it about career movement, but it's also about, if you are building a business, you want to find the very best people that you can connect with, that either can help you find investment or could potentially be critical resources in your venture. We were talking earlier about the entrepreneur and having this fallacy of repeat success. In some cases, there are lots of repeat success. They're very talented people, but sometimes it's not just about the entrepreneur. It's about the people that person surrounds themselves with, the team. When investors are looking at investing in ventures, they are definitely looking at, is this a viable idea? Is there a market for it? Will customers buy it? How big, how successful will this be if we invest into it? And what would that business plan look like? I mean, investors don't just dump money in things. It's not like we talked about the money store the last episode.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There's no money tree. There's no money store.
No.
Investors have to have confidence in you and the idea and in the product and the market. It's not like it's just like, here's a bunch of money, go run off and build something great. I mean,
Mm-hmm,
I've actually seen it once or maybe twice. I
mm-hmm,
have an old boss who told me, when he was at one of the big networking companies in the Bay Area, people would walk in with a PowerPoint and get funding, or they'd get acquired, and they just had a
mm-hmm,
great idea. We're beyond those days. And
mm-hmm,
AI is such a boom now. I'm sure there's a lot of this going on with respect to people coming up with very interesting ideas, and they're prototyping things very quickly. Are they built for speed? Are they scalable? I don't know. In many cases, they're not. But the investor's looking at this and saying, is this viable? But who is that person? And what does the team look like that's going to actually take this venture on the road and actually drive it to success? That matters so much. So this concept of networking is not just about you developing your career, building your career, making connections, finding your way to the next possible best outcome. It's also about affiliating yourself with people that will be with you along the ride. And I can't tell you how many times I have built teams and created that sort of close-knit family of individuals who work together to build success together, and then gone back to that well and asked them to come along for the next journey, the next ride.
mm-hmm,
And so that is a very popular concept. People build their tribes, and they like to take their tribes along with them when they go from job to job to job. And we
mm-hmm,
talked about this in an earlier episode. There is an evolution in your career. When you start out, you've got this, you're very much an individual and you're kind of finding your way through things. But when you become a leader and you start leading an organization, a team, a company, whatnot, you can do this serially for quite a long time. I mean, I've been in this industry for over 35 years, but there will be a time where I will just sort of like hang up, you know, my specs and say, I'm not in this anymore. I'm moving on. I'm going to take a break. And maybe my break won't be going and doing a 9 to 5 job. It'll be more of taking a
Yeah.
break and being a consultant or an advisor, being a mentor. Like I'm trying to mentor
Hmm.
people who are much younger than me. There's mentors who have mentored me who are much older than me, but at some point they end up saying, you know what, I'm going to go sit on the beach. I'm not
Hmm.
mentoring anymore. So there is an expiration date to these things.
Yeah, taking a break is a good thing for me right now. It's funny because I'm sort of segueing out of pro football, and I kind of told myself when I decided to leave my club in the European League of Football, and then I went to play a little small season in Norway for a month, and I came back and I was like, well, I still love the business of getting better and the business of sports and just whatever it brings. But, football, it just doesn't make sense in a very, very different ways. And I said, yeah, well, maybe I'll just get skinny and healthy and put sports at the number 3 of my priority list. And I've already entered a new big sports project. So I get how it can be difficult to like say, okay, well, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm gonna take a break. What I want to get into is, and that's a question a very, very intelligent person, one of my former coaches asked me. He asked me, Joel, why does hard work beat talent? What would you say is the answer?
Why does hard work need
Beat
talent?
talent. Beat.
Well, hard work beats talent in the sense that your commitment. So you can have raw talent. And I saw this, I went to music school, I went to conservatory when I was very young, my first degree, and I saw tremendous talent. But what I saw was tremendous discipline. And I even myself, as a student, I would lock myself in a room and play and rehearse and run through fundamentals and, all sorts of uh, practicing techniques to be able to perfect whatever I was working on at that time. And later I was a composer writing music. I was doing the same thing. But the idea is the talent is there, the capability is there, but the hard work is really applying that talent. And that's very different. So I think the hard work is you can be great at playing a game, but if you can't
Hmm.
play with others in the game, you'll be a solo artist. You'll be an exhibitionist. You'll be somebody who's, traveling around showing people how to throw a basketball into a hoop from half
Harlem
full court or
Globetrotters
whatever. It's
type of thing, yeah.
yeah, which by the way I've seen like many times in my life, and I absolutely love the Harlem
My
Globetrotters,
dad took me
and I'm
to a game
entertained.
once when I was like 12. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, my dad took me and my brother to the Harlem Globetrotters like religiously. They would come to our area where we grew up, and I met Meadowlark Lemon, I met Curly, I met all those people, and I loved it. So, but you think about it, it's that solo artist, right? Without the band, they're not really. And of course, you'd be that solo artist, and the band can change behind the scenes, but the band really provides that support for that solo artist. So, and that solo artist needs to define in many ways, they need to define a structure around them. And I think this is where that hard work concept comes in. You can just get up there and belt without a band, right? People would be pretty bored if that was the case, right? They rehearse, they arrange, they work with producers to perfect their approach. They work with choreography people to, choreographers who help them put on an amazing show. They work with all sorts of lighting and visual specialists to drive kind of a full experience in a concert. It's not just like, I'm super talented and this is just going to sell off the shelf. It's you've got to apply hard work, discipline, and structure, or it's sort of like this, kind of stallion that can't be, fenced in. And I guess it draws attention and interest from people, this
Hmm.
raw talent. But I think at the same time, it's pretty, the more unstructured that is, I think it can become pretty useless over time.
Yeah. The answer that he gave me, and he said hard work usually entails discipline and continuity. Discipline means that you do the work no matter how you feel. And continuity means that you just stick at it until you break through, until you succeed. And it goes back to what we said in the beginning. The one thing that you can control in almost any aspect of your life is the times you show up regardless, the times you try regardless of the outcome before. We talked about mental and physical health. If if you're highly talented and you're told your entire life, and then you get to college, and then you get to the NBA, and then you get to your first big company, you mess up, you get told you messed up, you're going to be, it's going to be something you've never experienced in your life. As the highly talented kid, getting told you're bad at what you do is going to probably mess with you mentally. So even in that answer, why does hard work beat talent? What my coach told me was, and the number one thing is you stay at it, you increase the number of attempts you put in to whatever you're trying to do, which will increase the opportunity and the likelihood of you succeeding in what you do. And it gave me so much solitude and gratitude for a reality that there is a very set way for me to almost guarantee success. Not in every case. I will never be a figure skater on ice. It's just not in my DNA. But there's things I can do that I will be pretty good at, and the likelihood of me succeeding is dictated to 90% by me, because I get the opportunity to go in and to continuously try and throwing things at the wall until something sticks, basically. And for me, as a young person that's in a world where so much uncertainty is happening, and where the traditional paths to success are getting rattled up and shaken up and sometimes disappear and new ones come up, it gives me a lot of peace and orientation that there is a very realistic thing that I can control, where it's not depending on others where I'll land, but on me, where I can make sure I get to where I want to be through my own efforts. What was the philosophy that you had, or what was the thought process about the big life ahead of you as a young person? You're trying to understand and figure everything out. What was the lifeline you clung on to when you had adversity, when you had a bad performance at a job, when you got fired, when whatever happened to you, just when adversity, when shit hit the fan? What was the lifeline you clung on to? Like for me, it is knowing that my attempts, the sheer amount of attempts, dictate the likelihood of me succeeding.
It's funny, my belief that I can do something, like you talked about discipline, but I think it's confidence as well. I
Mm-hmm.
think in the face of adversity, having belief in yourself and having the confidence, knowing that you do know what you're talking about, what you know what you know, and then having the confidence as you see the roadblocks emerge before you, your ability to reason and then react, and the ability to adapt. I think those are really important skills. I don't know, have you ever seen the movie Being There with Peter Sellers? Have you ever seen that? Have you seen that movie?
I
It's a
don't
great
think so,
movie,
no.
actually.
Okay.
Okay, so anybody's listening, anybody's watching, if you haven't seen it, it's called Being There. Famous movie with Peter Sellers. And he plays a character in the movie that he's a butler, but he's like a
Mm-hmm.
special guy. Every time he walks into the room, he's kind of like, he's a bit savant in the way he approaches things. People don't have confidence in him, but he just does, and he does amazing things. And the people are like, all these very sophisticated people in the movie, he's very simple. And all these very sophisticated people in the movie are blown away by him, and they think he's amazing. So there's really an amazing part of the movie where at the very, and I guess I'll just blow it for everybody, but there's an end part of the movie where he walks on water. And the really the essence, the context of that is that he walks on water. He believed he could walk on water, and no one ever told him he couldn't walk on water. So in my life, I've always thought about, I've never been hampered or deterred by something because I've always believed that I could do it. And if you approach these problems and think, I could never do that, this is not going to happen, it's not going to work. In that particular example, no one ever told him he couldn't walk on water. So he did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the kind of mentality, this courageous mentality that people have when they go into business, or they start a company, or they build a product, or they start a family, or they, move to a new town, or whatever it is. If you let all those negative vibes attack your, positive spirit, then you're going to defeat that very bright light that you have within you. But if you believe that you can conquer these things, and the belief, by the way, can come through, confidence in yourself, could be faith, very tied to, sort of religious faith. It could be tied to you've done this so many times that you know that you know that you know, which is both blessing and a curse, by the way, because when sometimes people know what they know what they know, they're very rigid about how they perceive how things should be done because they know they know they know. I've seen that happen, and I don't actually subscribe to that particular mentality because I think that everything is different based on the context. So, if you built a product in one industry and then you go to work in another, it's not guaranteed that it's going to work the same way. So you have to be adaptable, like I said earlier. But I think that key is believing in yourself, not being deterred by this. And it's very easy for somebody like me to say this, by the way. And I know that you're listening and other people may be listening and saying, well, like, this is easy for you. But it hasn't always been easy for me, right? It hasn't always
Mm-hmm.
been easy. And there was that point when you have to learn something new. That's been in my career every day of my career. I have tried to learn something new. Try
Mm-hmm.
is the key word. There are people that phone it in. They just go to work and they do whatever they do. And you know what? In some cases, that's fine. That's the makeup. That's the DNA. But there are people like me who go to work and they want to be challenged. They want to take on a new project. They want to be challenged with a new opportunity or a problem to solve. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
for me, that's very much an innate part of who I am. But I would say you to soldier through that adversity, that level of, I guess, stamina and endurance to go through that process, and your confidence in yourself is really the key. We talked about imposter syndrome. There are people that really struggle with this stuff. And it's unfortunate because I've met so many talented people who have imposter syndrome. Like, you can do this. It takes a village. You need people around you who encourage you. It's not all going to come from you. I mean, if it comes only from you, there's probably a bigger problem there. You may be an egotist, or maybe you're a narcissist. I don't know, but I think reality is you got to surround yourself around people as well who encourage you to do these things. And timing, all these things matter because, after you've done things in your career, you get more and more confident. So I'm not saying it's easy, like somebody coming right out of college. I have an intern who's working on my team, and he's in his, I think, he's going his second year.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just trying to encourage him to take as many chances as he can to learn as much as possible every day, every week while he's here. It's a 10-week internship. And I'm not challenging him in a negative way. I'm challenging him in a positive way to be the sponge and take it in, and also to think critically about what he's hearing, what he's seeing and hearing, and then taking that to the next level, saying, okay, now read me back what you heard, read me back what you've seen, and tell me how you would approach that same challenge. You saw
Yeah.
somebody else do it in the team. Now you tell me how you'd approach it. Really challenging people to stretch and build that muscle. So, I mean, again, this is somebody who's in college, early career, very beginning. He's taking an internship and he's just trying to get experience. And you got somebody like me who's been in this industry for 35 years. These are opposite ends of the spectrum, but the spirit is the same, which is challenge accepted, challenge defeated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You try.
Yeah, I had to think of one of my favorite songs when you talked about that movie and the guy walking on water because no one told him he couldn't. Guy Clark song called "The Cape," and I'll play a little piece of this at the end of this podcast. So because it's beautiful, and one of the verses says, "All these years the people said he was acting like a kid. He did not know he could not fly, so he did." He sings about a kid that always climbs up on the garage, puts a cape around him, and jumps off to be Superman. And then now he's old and gray with the flower set cape. So, but the thing, he did not know he could not fly, so he did. There is such a virtue in that saying, but my issue with it is not everything's going to be even keeled. So how do you deal with a situation where you're so confident in yourself, and let's take a healthy confidence in your abilities and not a narcissistic confidence in what you can do. And what is a healthy way of dealing with failure out of that confidence? Because to me, a healthy level of dealing with loss and with fails, like in the logic of failing your way to success, is to look at a situation, to look at the outcome, and trying to understand what happened and what you can take away from it to not make that same mistake again. So what's a healthy attitude towards, and what is the process you should have mentally to keep that confidence in yourself, but to also be realistic about what occurred and why it did?
Look, failure is an absolute gift in many ways, because if you tried and failed, it's better than not have tried at all, not have been trying at all, right? So to have tried and failed is better than to have never tried at all. I think that's the saying. You're going to learn a lesson, and if you have a inquisical kind of mind, and you're interested in being challenged by opportunity, and challenged by solving problems, like if you love to figure out puzzles, for instance, right? You're going to go through many iterations of trying to solve that problem, and you're going to fail. They're going to, the piece is not going to fit. And then you're going to figure out, okay, well, that's not the right piece. That's not the right hole. Let me figure out what the right piece is to fit in that hole. Eventually, you're going to figure it out. And those lessons along the way, those bits of failure, are going to be valuable, because, kind of like an algorithm that learns, eventually they figure out what that next step is in the process.
Mm-hmm.
They hit the wall like 100 times until they go, okay, this is not working. This is not working. What do they say? Insanity, the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. In this case, you would try new things, right? And I had a boss who would say, it was very interesting. He was mentoring in saying, you're going to make mistakes. He said, but only new mistakes are allowed. In other words, make your mistake, learn from it, and go move forward. And then don't ever make that mistake again. But you're allowed to make new mistakes. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where this lesson becomes very valuable, in the sense that if you don't try, you'll never know. And if you do try and you fail, you'll know. And if you have the courage to try again, you may just solve it. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
I think this is where the entrepreneur goes. I'm in software and hardware. I've been in all my career, and software is this sort of like gift that keeps on giving, in the sense that software's never finished, right? So when we're
Mm-hmm.
building software products, there's like no expiration date per se. And by the way, I remember early in my career, some brilliant person I worked with said, anything is possible in software, which is, it's absolutely true. It's absolutely
Mm-hmm.
true. There's no boundaries. I mean, the boundaries are mathematical, but the concept of, you know, do you think we can do that? And the person would say, of course, we can do it. Anything in software, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the concept of software, being able to apply software to solve a problem that, say, a physical world hardware can't solve. And so, uh, you know, you're going to hit many, many problems. You're going to have bugs. You're going to build stuff and you're going to have bugs. You're going to fix those bugs. You might find a new bug when you fix that bug. I can't tell you how many times we fixed a bug and found a bug, fixed a bug, found a bug, you
I do
know?
software for bakeries, dude. I'm finding things left and right. I think it's like that. You finally close that one door and you turn around and there's like three others that just occur. I feel you on that. Yeah.
But you don't stop. You found the bug, you fixed it. You don't stop and say, that's it. We're not building any more future features. You're going to keep building features. And that's the concept, which is I hit an issue, I failed, I fixed it, I conquered it, I moved on. I hit another one, I failed. There's this great line in Lost. The character's Jacob. I don't know if anybody watching knows the character from Lost. Of course, if you've seen Lost, you know who Jacob is. But he says that basically the concept of this is that he says it only ends once. He's talking about the end of the world. He says until then it's progress. So what he's saying is there's going to be a bunch of things that are going to happen, good and bad, until the end of the world. But he says it only ends once, but until then it's progress. So if we have a mindset when we are continuously moving, going forward, and really kind of driving ourselves forward, we'll hit roadblocks. We'll find them. We'll fix them. We'll go around them or under them. We'll get beyond them. But there'll be another roadblock. And it's okay, because that is life. That is going, it's work, it's science, it's life, it's everything, it's nature. You will hit a roadblock. You will have to figure out how to get over it, under it, around it, fix it, break it, whatever. And you'll get another one right after that. Think about it. It's your ability to defeat these roadblocks. And your resiliency is really the
Mm-hmm.
challenge. Are you
Mm-hmm.
resilient enough? So the entrepreneur needs to be resilient in their thinking, in their execution. If they give up, well, maybe, just maybe, they're missing that next big thing that they were about to build, but they gave up because, well, they ran out of money or the problem was too hard. The Moore's Law defeated them because they couldn't come up with the algorithm that would scale. Whatever it was, that in this case, it's, you know, no problem is too big if you have that mindset, and you will strive, you will drive yourself to solve that problem, or to meet the objective of that particular opportunity, or whatever it is. If you've got that mindset, anything is possible. So
Mm-hmm.
that's how I view things. I think that we're absolutely only at the beginning of where we can be with technology. I don't think we're anywhere near the end.
Absolutely. So let me try to summarize the main things on how to improve your odds to become successful at what you do. Number one is you got to stay at it, but there's ingredients to this. It's the people you surround yourself with. You have to have people that challenge you, that push you, but they catch you when you fall. They nurture you.
Well, I would say the other important pieces are that raw talent is kind of, honestly, it's a bit of a fallacy.
Mm-hmm.
That hard work does matter. You can't just phone it in, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if there's no everything I touch is turns to gold. So they're
Mm-hmm.
not perfect people. And it's not like some special thing that only happens to a certain group of people. That this is a capability that anybody can strive towards if they're driven by it. But the idea that that there is hard work involved in this is not, the network is everything, as you said. Building the right community around you to encourage you, to drive you, whether it's competition or it's collaboration. Setting all those sort of pieces in motion are really critical to your success.
Yeah. What I have to say, this episode, but also the research and the preparation for today gave me a lot of confidence and hope back in approaching my life and approaching my career, that there are so many things that I get to control that are so vital to the outcome. That gives me a lot of hope, and I hope it does to the people listening and to the younger people that are listening, that there is so many things you can control about your future, about your success, about what you surround yourself with. And I think that can get lost a little bit in a world where one of the things you talk about a lot, the instant gratification side of things, where we see influencers and big successful people that show you only one side of the coin, because that's how these algorithms and how these platforms work. And you only see that, but you know your own entire life, obviously. So you'll see the little amount of successes you have to the seemingly completely 100% successful life of someone else. And always one of the sayings I love, and it's also a biblical thing, the thief of joy is comparison. So I also love the idea of just staying in your lane and watering your own grass, and being so focused on watering your own grass that you don't realize how big of a lawn your neighbors have. Well, thank you so
That's a
much,
good
Stephen.
point.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you, Joel.
I
Yes.
hope you survive the jet lags and the constant back and forth. As always, the last word's
Yeah.
yours. So send the listeners off into a hopefully beautiful weekend.
Yeah, I would say thank you, Joel. A great episode. And obviously it's a little bit different being here on the other side of the world, but I would say, those who are, it's funny, we were talking earlier in this episode about, like, basically not everybody's cracked up, you know, to, uh, to do this kind of work. And I think everybody has capability. I don't think that there's anybody with, with zero capability. I think even the smallest, job is valuable. But there's a funny saying that I'll close with, which I kind of chuckle when I say it, but Woody Allen says, those who can do, those who can't teach, and those who can't teach, teach Jim, which is a bit of an insult to gym teachers who have an amazing and important job to do. But it's sort of like, you may not be the right person to be the entrepreneur, but you may be a great person to work for an entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely,
And that's okay.
absolutely.
That's okay. And by the way,
Perfectly fine.
you may not be the person who goes off and starts your own company, but you may be a great asset to someone that does start their own
Yeah.
company. So I
I'm
think
never going to be a
we have to figure
quarterback.
out yeah,
I'm never going to be a
exactly.
quarterback. Yeah.
And I'm never going to be, up on stage and playing guitar in front of, 20,000 people, because that wasn't my ultimate destination, even though maybe I started, right? I ended up taking a detour into technology. But irregardless, I think that, you know, we need to really reckon with that whole concept of it's okay sometimes to be a supporting actor and you don't have to be the star of the show. But if you are driven to be that lead actor, then, God bless you. It's a hard job, and it's not meant for everybody, but the ones who are really successful, it's not, if you open up behind the covers and, behind the curtains, it is, there's a lot more than just luck, as you said earlier.
Have a safe trip home. Have a great time in New Zealand and Chile, and I'll talk to you soon, buddy.
Thank you, Joel. Cheers.